The Senate will come to order. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I impose a call of the Senate.
The Senate is now under call. Senator Murphy for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and that the Sergeant at Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, if you be so kind as to stand. In our tradition, you know that we start with prayer, and following prayer, we will remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. But today's chaplain is Reverend Dr. Gina Garrett from First United Methodist Church in Redwood Falls, Minnesota. Again, as a gentle reminder, remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning. Let us pray. To our most honored Creator God, we are humbled before you this momentous day and how you have blessed this great body of representatives of the people of Minnesota. When the nation is in a great state of unrest and division, you have given this body wisdom, love, and respect. As a state, we can trust them to lay aside political differences and put the needs of what is best for Minnesota first and foremost. We trust that the love within each of them will extend to each other, thereby flowing out to we the people, and we will see that love in the laws they make to benefit and serve each citizen of this great state. They have difficult tasks before them, and sometimes they become weary. I ask you to revive them again, to strengthen them to reason a little longer and to listen to each other a little deeper. Creator God, look down upon these, your people, with mercy and bless them as only you can, with a vision that surpasses all political visions to help the people in this state. When any leader is challenged to throw in the towel, admit defeat, and give up, give them the spirit of pause, to sit still, breathe deeply, and wait on the calms to carry on. Because we are human and live in an earthen vessel, when the anger rises, send a calming breeze of peace that will soothe the furrowed brow. When the trial of fatigue and listening becomes so great, allow the faith they have in each other and the love for the state of Minnesota to produce the endurance needed to go a little while longer. Yes, there is much yet to be done, but you have deposited a genius within each present today, and that genius will know what to do and when it should be done. Bless them even deeper with patience for each speaker, and give each speaker a sense of brevity when needed. We are grateful for this body of wisdom and know that they will be the best of the best for our state. Now, as they enter the business of the day, I speak a blessing of order, productivity, and generosity of responses to public needs. I bless them to engage in transparent processes and to foster a culture of collaboration and compromise. I challenge them to continue to walk in their respective high personal standards and to cultivate alliances for the best of our state. As it has been spoken, let it be done. In the name of He who is mighty above all, amen.
Thank you, members. The secretary will take the roll.
Abler, Anderson, Barr, Bolden, Carlson, Champion, Clark, Coleman, Swadzinski, Dames, Dibble, Dornick, Draheim, Drazkowski, Duckworth, Farnsworth, Fateh, Frentz, Green, Grunhagen, Gustafson, Hoschild, Herr, Hoffman, Housley, Howe, Jasinski, Johnson, Johnson Stewart, Klein, Coran, Kroon, Kunish, Kupek, Lang, Latz, Liskey, Limmer, Lucero, Mann, Marty, Matthews, May Quaid, McEwen, Miller, Mitchell, Mohammed, Murphy, Nelson, Umu Verbaten, Pappas, Pa, Port, Pratt, Putnam, Rarick, Rasmussen, Rest, Seeberger, Utke, Weber, Wiesenberg, Westland, Westrom, Wickland, Zhang.
Members, a quorum is present. The following members intend to vote from a remote location under Rule 40.7. Senator Fateh. Members, if you want to follow along on the Senate agenda. Members, if we could quiet ourselves, that would be great. If you want to have a conversation, please do it quietly, or I invite you to go off the Senate floor. As I mentioned, I'm reading from today's Senate agenda, Monday, April 28, 2025. We will begin at the third order of business. Messages from the House. The Secretary will read the message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce the passage by the House of the following House files herewith transmitted. House file numbers 1354, 2432, 2551, 2563, and 3022. Signed, Patrick Duffy Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
Members, no action is required. We'll now proceed to the fourth order of business, which is first reading of House bills. The House files have been given their first reading and referred as indicated. Senator Murphy for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to lay House File 3022 on the table.
To that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. There are two committee reports to read at the desk. The Secretary will read the reports.
Senator Marty from the Committee on Finance, to which was re-referred Senate File Number 3054, a bill for an act relating to human services. Reports the same back with a recommendation that the bill be amended, and when so amended, the bill do pass.
Mr. President.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 21, I object to the reference of Senate File Number 3054.
3054. So pursuant to Rule 21, because that issue is not debatable, it would be referred to rules. The Secretary will read the next message.
Senator Marty from the Committee on Finance, to which was re-referred Senate File Number 2077, a bill for an act relating to state government appropriating money for environment and natural resources. Reports the same back with the recommendation that the bill be amended as follows, and when so amended, the bill do pass.
To that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Senator Murphy for a motion to adopt the committee reports. I forgot that step. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the committee reports printed in the agenda and read by the Secretary be adopted.
On the adoption of the committee reports, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, we will now go to the sixth order of business. The Secretary will read the Senate file numbers.
Senate File Number 2077.
The Senate files have been given their second reading. Members, we will now go to the seventh order of business, which is the second reading of House bills. The Secretary will read the House file numbers.
House File Number 2446.
The House file has been given its second reading. We will now proceed to the eighth order of business, which is introduction and first reading of Senate bills. The bills listed on today's introduction calendar are given their first reading and referred as indicated. Members, we'll now go to the ninth order of business, which is motions and resolutions. We will adopt the author's motions as one motion. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Senator Murphy for a motion.
Thank you again, Mr. President. I am moving on behalf of Senator Champion that Senate File Number 1832, which is number 36 on general orders, be stricken and re-referred to the Committee on Finance.
Senator Murphy, on behalf of Senator Champion, moves that Senate File number 1832, number 36 on general orders be stricken and re-referred to Committee on Finance. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Remaining on the motions and resolutions, Senator Murphy to designate special orders.
Mr. President, pursuant to Rule 26, I designate the following bills be made special orders for immediate consideration. Members, the list is on your desk.
Members, it is true that the special orders list is on your desk and is dated April 28, 2025. We will begin with Senate File number 2370, Senator Dibble for the Omnibus Cannabis Policy Bill.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I have the honor of presenting Senate File number 2370 today, the Omnibus Cannabis Bill. Members, the bill before you is a compilation of a number of other bills that were heard separately and then taken in and compiled together and have become this omnibus bill. 5 of the bills contained herein are what we would call agency bills. They're prepared by the Office of Cannabis Management, and I will enumerate those momentarily. One of them is the underlying bill itself, Senate File 2370, and then there are several items that were taken in committee via amendment. So starting from the top, the first bill that I'll describe is Senate File 2372, which is termed the housekeeping bill, and its goals are to create more clarity and consistency and provide a number of technical fixes. Mr. President, members, what this language does, and you'll find it spread throughout about 48 of the 70 or so sections that are in the bill. It adds definitions and statutory language throughout Chapter 152 and Chapter 342 to clarify the authority of the Office of Cannabis Management to manage the medical cannabis program as it has been transitioned from the Department of Health over to the Office of Cannabis Management, which I will refer to as the OCM. It reinstates some definitions and some authorities that were inadvertently repealed. It clarifies some authorized activities so that there's consistency between some of the license types. It fixes some grammatical errors, some terminology fixes. It aligns the definitions of what a bona fide labor organization is and a labor peace agreement is with respect to licensing requirements. It clarifies expectations in the background check process required in Chapter 342. And members, I'll just mention quickly while I'm thinking about it, Chapter 342 is ultimately going to be the prevailing chapter that governs and oversees adult use and medical use cannabis in Minnesota. The original chapter in which the medical cannabis program was established, 152, ultimately will sunset. That being said, there is a section of law, Section 10.75, which is the subject of the next bill I'll describe, Senate File 1730, which simply designates the Office of Cannabis Management, as we do a number of other offices, as well as all other state agencies, as an agency for the purpose of sitting at the Minnesota Indian Affairs Council table for the required sorts of consultation that occurs in that forum and setting. The next bill I'll describe is Senate File 1729. You can see the contents in Sections 2, 55, 67, and 69. It clarifies the regulation of lower potency hemp-derived cannabinoid products, aligns their expectations so that they're the same between retailers and manufacturers, ensures labeling is consistent so that there's effectiveness of enforcement, et cetera, consumer understanding, and adds clarity for enforcement of non-intoxicating cannabinoid products. The next bill is Senate File 1731, which clarifies application requirements for cannabis business licensure. You'll find that in Section 37, removes duplication and subjectivity, replaces optional requirements with some that are more objective. And then finally, of the agency bills, we have Senate File 2371, which improves access and protections for medical cannabis patients. And that you'll find just scattered throughout, starting at Section 30 all the way up through Section 62 in about 10 sections or so. It clarifies an employee's role in distributing medical cannabis, strengthens protections for medical cannabis patients so that they can avoid being discriminated against when it comes to housing, employment, educational opportunities, among other things. It aligns existing statutes with new policies that were implemented last session with respect to caregivers and what caregivers can do on behalf of patients, particularly with respect to growing plants in their home, and then it maintains tribal reciprocity for medical patients to purchase medical products off of tribal lands at state licensed medical dispensaries. The underlying bill itself, Senate File 2370, has to do with beverages, the low potency cannabinoid beverages. A container right now contains 2 servings at 10 milligrams, 5 milligrams each. That doesn't change. Just some of the labeling requirements around that allows those beverages to be that are manufactured and labeled in Minnesota to be sold in other states and vice versa. It makes that all much more consistent. There's not a little line that needs to be drawn on the can or anything like that. By amendment came in an exception for municipalities that have a municipal liquor store that are now allowed to sell low-potency hemp products. Those municipalities would also be authorized to open up cannabis retail, but there's a little bit of inconsistency. If you're selling cannabis retail, the low-potency hemp piece conflicts, and so that allows them to continue selling their low-potency hemp products in their muni liquor store. There's a specialty license called an event license, and so at those events under this proposal, those cannabis retailers are usually very, very small retailers, will be able to table at those events and give away some samples under some fairly stringent labeling and dosage and disclosure requirements. Likewise, a cannabis retailer can't give a sample to a consumer who is visibly intoxicated. This is the same as some of the beer festivals that we see around the state. Operates very similarly. For those who are visiting the state of Minnesota, who are registered in their medical program in their state, as well as those who are registered in their medical program on tribal lands, they will be able to come to Minnesota or travel off their tribal lands and be able to access the medicine they need at medical retailers if they can show that they are a registered medical patient in the programs in their respective tribe or state. And then finally, it does add the low-potency hemp products to products that Department of Human Services can adopt reasonable restrictions for on use in their licensed healthcare facilities. So similar to what occurs today with medical cannabis, people can access the medicine they need in these facilities, but with some reasonable restrictions. Mr. President, members, that is the bill in front of us, and I will respond to questions or respond to ideas for amendments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the A16.
Senator Port moves the A16 amendment. The Secretary will report the A16 amendment.
Senator Port moves to amend Senate File number 2370 as follows. Page 58, after line 4, insert. This is the A16 amendment.
Senator Port, to your A16 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this amendment is the Cannabis Expungement Board technical changes bill that we are adding onto this bill as well in order to match up with the other body. This bill accomplishes 3 major things. It captures some cannabis offenses that were unintentionally missed in the drafting of the original legislation. The original legislation clearly meant to include all levels of felony cannabis offenses. All felony level sale crimes are included by specific statutory reference, for example, but 5th-degree sales were omitted for some reason. Referring to cannabis offenses in the relevant chapter without citing subdivisions corrects that unintentional omission, retains the eligibility criteria, and conveys the original intent of the bill more clearly. It also addresses the issue of the courts not sealing records in multi-count cases. Due to a technical issue with sealing only one or some counts in a case that includes multiple counts, last year the Minnesota Supreme Court issued an administrative order regarding cannabis expungement. The order states that the judicial branch shall only expunge cases if the entire case qualifies. This bill captures many of those cases by allowing the entire case, every count, to be expunged if all the other charges were dismissed or would otherwise be eligible for expungement under the automatic expungement law. And then finally, it includes historic cannabis offenses that might not be included in the statute. Based on the current statute, any cannabis convictions prior to 1989 are not eligible for review. And by including the language or any other statutes criminalizing the possession, sale, transportation, or cultivation of marijuana, the bill will capture those past cannabis offenses. This is recommended by the Cannabis Expungement Board as they move through their felony expungements, which they go through one at a time. Happy to take questions if anyone has them.
Any questions on the A16? Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Port, for offering the A16. Member Senator Port and I have had an opportunity to discuss this amendment. I think the changes that are recommended by the Expungement Board are taken in good faith and are well advised, and I would appreciate a yes vote on the A16. Thank you, Mr. President.
All in favor of the A16 say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. The A16 is adopted. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the A10.
Senator Nelson offers the A10 amendment. The Secretary will report the A10 amendment.
Senator Nelson moves to amend Senate File Number 2370 as follows. Page 26, after line 1, insert. This is the A10 amendment.
Senator Nelson, to your A10 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The A10 amendment members and the remaining 3 amendments that will be offered next, that would be the A10, the 11, the 12, and the 13 amendment, were passed off this floor as friendly amendments when the Office of Cannabis bill was passed. I'm hopeful they will be considered friendly amendments today. The first one, members, is the A10 amendment. The A10 amendment requires the Office of Cannabis Management to enforce THC content and potency limitations. The adverse effects of cannabis use, such as cannabis use disorder, psychosis, suicidal ideation, impaired driving, emergency room visits, and cognitive decline, increase as the THC dose and content increases. There is no scientifically determined healthy amount of THC in cannabis products. So the goal of this amendment is limiting the THC content's harmful reductions. I will not hand out to you, but I will note for you that the National Academies of Science, Engineering, Medicine, Cannabis Policy Impacts, Policy Health, and Health Equity of 2024 has significantly spoken of these issues and of the limits, and they recommend the limits that are in the amendment before you. The Association of Cannabis Potency with Mental Ill Health and Addiction, a systemic review. This was in the Lancet Psychiatry, Volume 9, Issue 9, page 736, 750. I don't expect you to read that all, but what I want you to know is the potency limits that you have in the A10. They have provided the rationale for those. And then also the last note I will mention to you is the report and recommendations of the High Potency Cannabis Think Tank to the State of California, October 30th, 2024, prepared by Independent Scientific Committee, convened by the California Department of Public Health. So members, certainly I would ask for support. I do hope this is once again a friendly amendment. It was lost in conference committee when it passed off this floor when we passed the OCM bill. So I'd ask for a yes vote.
Senator Dibble on the A10 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the A10 amendment, Senator Nelson, and I very much respect and appreciate the perspective you bring to this discussion and appreciate this considered amendment. Mr. President, Senator Nelson would yield.
Senator Nelson, will you yield? She will yield. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I know that the bill as passed in 2023, and I'm sure we're going to hear from Senator Port in just a moment, who's much more knowledgeable about this subject than I am. And let me just say parenthetically, I ask the indulgence and patience of this chamber as we go through the discussion and the amendment process because I am running to catch up with a lot of these things. And so I'm going to be asking for help. I'm going to be phoning a friend. We got folks over in the corner here who are going to help me out sometimes too. So it might take me a little while to respond as I become more educated on the fly. But what I do know is that this subject of potency of the various forms was authorized to be the subject of rulemaking. That rulemaking was recently completed, I think just within the last week or so, in a rulemaking process. And everyone, of course, understands the rulemaking process is a very public, very collaborative, very open and transparent process. And so my question to Senator Nelson, Mr. President, is are these various potencies consistent with what we've seen in the recently adopted and finalized rules?
Senator Nelson, to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Dibble. I did neglect in not reading what those 4 limits are, so I will read those, and then I will specifically answer your question. If the new rules limit THC in concentrations to 30% or 10 milligrams, whichever is less, if the new rules limit or cap cannabis flower potency at 10%, and if the new rules ban infused THC in pre-rolls and flower, and finally, if the new rules restrict hemp edibles to 5 milligrams THC per serving, max potency of 0.3%, then they comply with those new rules. But I do not have those new rules in front of me. I would hope that it does comply. As I said, this was a friendly amendment last year, and we have the scientific backing of this particular amendment.
Any other questions? Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Senator Nelson, for a very elegant and artful response, which I appreciate and respect very much. Mr. Chair, members, I would request a no vote on the A10, just for the reason that I just stated. We did empower the OCM working with the public to establish rules, to establish these limitations, and I would want to know first what has happened through that collaborative process. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I would also request a no. Some of these are already required. The restriction of hemp edibles to 5 milligrams with a max potency. We do ban the infused THC. Capping cannabis flower potency would need to be explained more in depth in order for this to work, because it doesn't explain whether that is pre-combustion or post-combustion, which are very different levels of potency. And so for that reason, the rules does address these things, and I encourage members to take a look at the rules, read through them, and also reach out to OCM if they think that through their rulemaking ability they need different guidance, but they have addressed all of these things in their rulemaking. And so for that reason, please vote no.
Any other discussion before we go to the author of the amendment? Senator Dibble?
Mr. President, I would like to request a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Any other discussion before we go to the author of the amendment? Seeing none, Senator Nelson, you will have the last word on the A10 before we vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have the new rules were adopted on April 14th, so just about last week or so. And I do want to make sure that the body knows this. I know it's important to all of us. yes, the new THC potency limits cannabis concentrations maximum to 30% total THC. That is in the amendment before you. And it also limits cannabis flower to 10% total THC. That is in the amendment before you. And it's limited to 2.5 milligrams of THC for hemp edibles, which I don't see there, and does not exceed 500 milligrams per package of topical and transdermal. So with that, Mr. President and members, I believe this amendment has been adopted by rules, and for that reason, I will withdraw it at this time. If I find there's a gap, I would certainly bring that to the body's attention. So I would withdraw the A10.
Senator Nelson withdraws the A10 amendment. Senator Nelson, to your next amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the A11 amendment.
Senator Nelson offers the A11 amendment. The Secretary will report the A11 amendment.
Senator Nelson moves to amend Senate File Number 2370 as follows. Page 56, line 13, after information, insert. This is the A11 amendment.
Senator Nelson, to your A11 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. This is a cannabis labeling requirement modifications. Adults are self-medicating with cannabis as a result of suffering common and serious side effects. The Minnesota Baseline Marijuana Assessment High Incidence DTA HIDA report in February. Let me shut that off. Report of February of 2024 shows an increasing number of cannabis poison calls and hospital visits, especially among adults and seniors. Unfortunately, the current cannabis law does not create a comprehensive education program for adults who use cannabis. Medical warnings on the product labels or packaging or pamphlet is one of the few ways that the OCM can educate adult consumers about cannabis health risks. Now, our current statute, as of today, 242.63 subdivision 6, mandates that businesses must provide to consumers factual information about impairment effects and side effects of cannabis products. However, members, there's a loophole in the law. It doesn't specify what that factual information must come from, that it must come from the office. And it means retailers can download misinformation from the industry websites and give that to consumers. And then the amendment before you closes the loophole by stating that medical warning information must be specified by the Office of Cannabis Management. It adds statutory requirements for critical medical warnings and ensures that medical warnings are provided directly to the consumer at the point of sale, not simply putting something up on the bulletin board at the back of the store, which would be allowed now. Again, this was a friendly amendment when it was presented as we passed the cannabis bill. I would ask for a yes vote and hope that it is a friendly amendment again today. I don't think any of us would want people to not know what is in the products that they are using. Oh,
thank you,
Mr. President. I'm sorry,
yes, Senator Nelson.
I forgot to add one other thing. I want people to be fully aware of what the amendment says. It also it also includes that 8-hour warning against driving. You might have read about the problems with not using the cannabis within the and driving within 8 hours. So this also identifies that.
Senator Dibble, to the A11 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I once again thank Senator Nelson for a well-considered amendment brought in good faith, and I appreciate very much the perspective and the information that Senator Nelson brings in offering the A11, if Senator Nelson would yield.
Senator Nelson, will you yield? She will yield. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Senate President champion. Senator Nelson, similar question as on the A10. I know that labeling was another matter that was subject to the rule writing process through the Office of Cannabis Management, the OCM. Again, a process in which they do utilize research and evidence, as well as a highly collaborative, transparent public process. And Senator Nelson, are these labeling requirements consistent with the recently adopted rules for labeling?
Senator Nelson, to the question, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Dibble, I do not have that specifically in front of me, particularly if it was one of those new rulings. But if you would like, I will be glad to withdraw this and get those particular rulings. But I do have a question for Senator Dibble. I guess that would be my question back to the questioner.
Senator Dibble, will you yield? Because you have the floor. Will you yield?
Yes, Mr. President.
He will yield. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Dibble, are you aware of the new Office of Cannabis regulation that was passed? We don't even have a director yet, so I'm glad they're moving forward on these things. But I would like to know if Senator Dibble is aware of any opposition to the information requested on the labeling, and that would be the A11 amendment.
Senator Dibble, directly to the question, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. To answer Senator Nelson's question, the question was sincere because I have not read the rules myself. I do know they exist, and I knew that that was a part of the mandate of the 2023 legislation. There is an interim director, just to clarify and correct the record in case the public thinks it's a leaderless organization. There is an interim director who is doing a very, very capable job there now. And to answer the second question that Senator Nelson asked, am I aware of any opposition to the A11 in the suggestion in here? I'm not aware of opposition. The point that I would make, however, in response, is that we have a process, and it's not a process that occurs in a black box under the cover of night. It's a rule-making process that, by design, invites in a multitude of perspectives, invites in evidence and current industry standards around issues like disclosure, like labeling, et cetera. And I know that they've done a good job. The rule writing process has gone on for the better part of a year and a half or more, and the rules were just adopted. And so I would request a no vote on the A11 and request a roll call, Mr. President.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, at this moment, it doesn't appear that OCM has addressed this particular issue, at least according to ChatGPT. However, with that in mind, I do want to honor Senator Dibble's request, and I will remove the amendment at this point, but I will bring it back when I get a definitive answer from, well, we don't have that director yet, but from OCM directly. This labeling is so important, members, that I want to make sure that it is in place, and I will withdraw the amendment at this moment and get the exact status of OCM on labeling. So with that, Mr. President, I will withdraw the A11 amendment.
The A11 amendment has been withdrawn. Senator Nelson, for your next amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the A12 amendment, and that amendment specifically...
Senator Nelson, can I have him read and introduce the amendment? Senator Nelson offers the A12 amendment. The Secretary will report the A12 amendment.
Senator Nelson moves to amend Senate File Number 2370 as follows. Page 27 after line 13, insert. This is the A12 amendment.
Senator Nelson, now to your A12 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment before you is the A12 amendment. And members, this would simply remove the prohibition that we have placed on our counties regarding their inability to prohibit the retail sale of cannabis flower products, hemp-derived consumer products, and also the micro businesses with the retail operations endorsement, cannabis meso businesses with the retail operations endorsement, cannabis retailers, medical cannabis combination businesses operating retail locations. This is about local control, members. This does allow our counties, duly elected commissioners, to determine if they will or will not prohibit cannabis business in their county. Now, this is not a function of the OCM. You do have a letter on your desk from the League of Minnesota Counties and the League of Minnesota Cities talking about the importance of allowing this local determination and not forcing a particular cannabis license, retail license, meso business, or micro business in a particular county. So this is about local control, and I would ask for a yes vote. This was not part of the 2023 legislation. With that, I would ask for a yes vote.
Senator Dibble to the A12 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, at the time at which, I guess we call it House File 100 or Senate? House File 100, so the 2023 bill, we, as a legislature, as a chamber, opted not to create a patchwork of availability of retail cannabis for consumers based on what city they live in. We saw that happen previously under the low-dose world when that existed. And so this action caused a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration in greater Minnesota, and of course resulted in a lot of inadvertent prosecution or inadvertent violations and prosecution against violators. And so that was the public policy goal, was not to create that patchwork of confusion. We've seen that attempted in other states, and it creates a marketplace that's quite distorted and doesn't work well and doesn't meet the needs of the people of Minnesota. So that's my position, Mr. President. I respect Senator Nelson and thank her for offering the amendment. And of course, I just want to make clear as I speak for or against any of the amendments that are offered, so I don't have to repeat this. I just encourage members to listen to the arguments and vote their best judgment and how they feel they represent their constituents best. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I asked for a no vote on this. This was a huge discussion that we had in 2023 when we passed this bill, and it's one of the biggest lessons that we learned from other states who had previously legalized. What we learned in other states, including Colorado, California, Washington, Oregon, and Oklahoma, was that when there is a patchwork of where there is legalization and where there is still prohibition, in the areas where there is prohibition, the illicit market grows. So part of the work of this legislation is not only to legalize, decriminalize, and regulate this product, but also to ensure that there is less of an illicit market in Minnesota, which happens when you have a well-regulated legal market. When you have patchwork areas where there is no legal market, it is essentially raising a big flag for the illicit market and saying, come here, there's demand and there's no regulation. And we saw illicit markets grow in all of the prohibition areas that existed in legalized states. So for that reason, members, I ask for a no vote.
Senator Klein.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, two items. First of all, the paper distributed on our desks does not comport with Senate traditions. There's no autograph on the paper. I assume it's coming from Senator Nelson, but traditionally we have a senator who puts their name on these distributions. And second, I request a roll call vote.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. That's a good place to remind you, members, when you're going to have something distributed on the floor, by rules, you have to have your name on it, so that is clear as to where the document is coming from. Senator Grudenhagen.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, members, I had a close friend about 15 years ago. I still keep in touch with him. Moved to Colorado. And his perspective on the legal marijuana is there they can decide by jurisdiction whether to allow or not. Here, if you have 12,000, I think it's 500 population, you have to allow the sale of recreational marijuana. From his perspective, it's worked very well. If you do your research on the internet, right now it says a significant number. Back in 2017, 65% of the jurisdictions out of 320 had banned recreational marijuana stores. So that's over 200. And again, this is your local representatives who are elected by the people responding to what they see as a negative effect of the sale of this marijuana to the public. The other thing I would say, according to my friend in Colorado, he says you can, when you go to a county or area where it is legal, the smell, you can smell it from 200-300 yards away, and it does have a distinct odor. The other thing he said is that, I know it was mentioned, well, if you ban it, then you're going to have more illegal. He said the illegal is cheaper than the legal. So most people, or a significant number, buy the illegal. So you don't incentivize the legal as much as incentivizing the illegal. And so for those reasons, I think we should give local counties and districts and municipalities the right to make this decision for what's best for their people and their children. So please vote green on this amendment. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the A12 before we go to the author, who will have the final word before we vote? Seeing none, Senator Nelson, you have the last word.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to acknowledge, yes, my signature should have been on this letter. My apologies, I did not get that on there. Senator Klein is correct. That letter is from me. I also want to be perfectly clear, should some have not noticed, the letter is from 2023. But I did speak with, of course, Mr. Hilgard regarding this letter, which he sent to me today to be distributed on the floor. So I wanted to be very clear about that. So, members, one, I'm going to ask for a roll call. I think this is incredibly important. And in general, the counties are supportive of the principle of allowing communities to decide for themselves whether they want to allow the establishment of cannabis-related businesses within their boundaries. And if so, how many? It is legal in our state, but we should not be mandating what businesses and how many of them need to be in each of our counties. We do not do that for any other business. I might like a Target in every county. There are some counties that don't have a Target. I'm just saying a Target store. We should not be mandating what that is. And so it is legal statewide. Cannabis is legal statewide. And our counties do support the premise of allowing counties and cities to opt in to various levels of the industry. There's a variety of levels of the industry. And counties should be able to determine which of those are going to be allowed in their county. As I said, we don't treat any other business this way, that it must be a certain amount of these businesses in each county. And it's an important discussion today, specifically because in this legislature, the fact that we went from 18 billion surplus down to a 6 billion deficit means that there's proposals today that would take away the cannabis aid program. That's why it's important, Mr. President. A small but meaningful revenue sharing program, and it helps support our communities with these mandated responsibilities. Registration, age verification, compliance, testing in this new system. We must give them the flexibility. We have proposals that are going to even take away the funding, the meager funding that they have to have these cannabis businesses and do the regulatory work on those. So, and I do want to know the Senate did do good work bolstering the elements of local control, but there's more we can do and we must do, especially with the threat of taking away their funding to even start this work. So I would encourage a green vote. We need to support our communities, maybe who are feeling this loss of control, the funding, and their communities, their downtowns. They might be worried about how the cannabis industry is going to impact their downtowns and communities, and particularly in parts of this state that are in less support. So again, this is about local control. I encourage a green vote. I thank the members for their consideration. And I do call for a roll call.
Members, we usually don't like for people to speak after the author. Senator Dibble.
Oh, Mr. President, I'm not jumping up to step on Senator Nelson's comments. I appreciate the rule and try to follow it. I would just like to impose a call of the Senate, Mr. President, only because this chamber, everyone seems to be scattered to the four winds. It's not a posture of anything other than to allow for us to get back to the chamber to vote on all of these important amendments that are coming up. And Mr. President, I would request the call of the Senate to last for the duration of the bill. Thank you.
The Senate is now under call. Senator Dibble for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that the proceedings of the call be dispensed with and the Sergeant-at-Arms bring in the absent members. Is that right?
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, we are under call through the duration of this bill. The Secretary will take the roll on the A12 amendment. Senator Houschild, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Mr. President, I report Senator Fate votes no.
Senator Fate votes no.
Senator Rest votes no.
Senator Rest votes no. Members, please vote. Senator Pa and Senator Young. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There being 29 ayes and 34 noes, the A2 Nelson Amendment is not adopted. Senator Nelson, for your next amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the A13 amendment.
Senator Nelson offers the A13 amendment. The secretary will report the A13 amendment.
Senator Nelson moves to amend Senate File number 2370 as follows. Page 26, after line 1, insert. This is the A13 amendment.
Senator Nelson, to your A13 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, the A13 amendment would ban adding additional flavors to cannabis, much as has been done with tobacco. It would prohibit added flavors in inhaled cannabis products and misleading marketing suggesting those flavors. This is just in the smoked products, the inhaled cannabis products. We know that youth are drawn to flavored products, just like they have been with tobacco. And again, the goal is to keep cannabis out of the hands of our youngest Minnesotans and to not hide the taste of cannabis under flavorings, as we have tried to do with tobacco, and also that there would not be any misleading suggestions about those flavors covering up the cannabis.
Senator Dibble to the A13 Nelson Amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. And again, I thank Senator Nelson for an important discussion and for her good faith ideas that she brings. Mr. President, I will not be voting in favor of the A13 simply because I know that this discussion has been around for a bit and hasn't had the benefit yet of a full conversation and debate in the hearing process, which I think it deserves. And so from my perspective, I'm attracted to the idea, but do believe it needs the benefit of some more conversation, some committee hearing time, and some debate. Thank you.
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is one of the pieces that I've grown sort of most dug in on, and I used to be on the other side of it. I used to think this was a really good idea to ban flavored products because kids want flavored products, and so we should ban them. But what we've seen in jurisdictions that have banned them is that it pushes people, again, to the illicit markets. You can buy these online. You can go online right now and order them, and they'll be shipped to you. It's not legal, but people are doing it. If we can shift the culture in Minnesota to buying products in legal dispensaries, which is the entire point of legalization, if we could shift that away, we shift people to buying the products in regulated spaces. The thing I will say I've learned over the last 3 years is the single most dangerous cannabis product is vape oil. It is very difficult, if it is not well regulated, to know what's in it. There are a number of them that have been tested that have very dangerous metals in them, that have other substances in them. Unregulated vape oil is the single most dangerous cannabis product. And so we really need to keep this part regulated. And for that reason, I changed my mind. And I believe that we should keep these products legal so that we can keep them regulated. And for that reason, I ask for a no vote.
Members, let me go to Senator Dibble.
Mr. President, I'd like to request a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Any other discussion before I go to the author of the amendment? Seeing none, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I appreciate the thoughtful discussion that we've had today. I would say that certainly having marijuana legal in a regulated market is far superior to the illicit market. I do acknowledge that. However, there is nothing that is preventing people from going to the illicit market. In fact, if you talk to Minnesota or to marijuana consumers, cannabis consumers, they already are saying it's too expensive in the state-sanctioned shops. So while I appreciate cutting out the illicit market, I do not think voting against these common sense amendments actually are going to prohibit the use of the illicit market. I do encourage a yes vote. We know the danger of flavorings. We know it from the tobacco industry. The cannabis industry is no different. I encourage a yes vote. Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Members, we're under roll call, and we are now going to vote. The Secretary will take the roll on the A13 Nelson Amendment. Senator Hoschow, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Fate votes no.
Senator Fate votes no.
Senator Rest votes no.
And Senator Rest votes no.
Mr. President.
Senator Rasmussen, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Wiesenberg votes no.
Senator Wiesenberg votes no. All senators having voted, who desires to vote? The Secretary will close the roll. There being 19 ayes and 46 noes, the A13 Nelson Amendment is not adopted. Senator Abler.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the discussion. As this came to our committee, I'd like to move, I'll just do that first. I move the A14.
Senator Abler moves the A14 amendment. The Secretary will report the A14 amendment.
Senator Abler moves to amend Senate File Number 2370 as follows. Page 47, after line 18, insert. This is the A14 amendment.
Senator Abler to your A14 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't need to talk very long about this. The concern I have is sober homes and places where abstinence is a key part of the program. Taking a different life, I could have been in one of those places, but they didn't have them then. I didn't need it. But some people are triggered by being near smoking and all that, and so this would just allow them not to have to do this. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Abler. Senator Dibble to the A14 Abler amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Senator Abler, just like the Senator Nelson amendments. It's considered and brought in good faith, and I certainly understand and respect the perspective. Just like the Senator Nelson amendments, you know, there's two perspectives. Mr. President, I'm going to be voting against the A14 But like with every other amendment, I invite members to make their own determination. This is what I worry about on the A14, and that is that particularly with respect to medical cannabis, people would be unable to access the medicine that they need for symptoms and conditions from which they suffer, some of which are quite serious. As they are moving through their sobriety journey, they may have struggles with things like seizure disorders. They may have struggles with other sorts of disorders that, even though, well, this is the whole subject of the medical cannabis debate. It's a Schedule I drug, but the fact of the matter is it doesn't belong on Schedule I. It is shown to be highly effective in the ways that no other substances, whether those are highly developed, highly researched pharmaceuticals. Some of those pharmaceuticals simply don't have the efficacy and have the downside side effects as to be even worse than medical cannabis is in some instances. The flip side, of course, is that for those substances that are that come in smokable forms, that of course has a consequence and an impact on people, other people around you. So I understand the motivation for the A14. But we do have already in law reasonable restrictions that can be implemented and put into effect so that it can be a considered allowable use. So that's my perspective on the subject, Mr. President. I would hate to think that folks on their sobriety journey wouldn't have access, for example, to an edible or an oil form or a tincture that would help, for example, with pretty serious seizure disorders, just one example. But again, I understand the A14. It's an important discussion to have, and I encourage people to vote their conscience. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Dibble, are you going to request a roll call? Because I know before you came up. If not, I just want to remind you because I know sometimes that happens.
Right. Thank you. Yes, Mr. President, I will request a roll call, not for the purpose of catching everyone on their votes, just to make sure everyone votes on these amendments and we have a true reflection of the will of the chamber. Thank you, Mr. President.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is one of those really complicated pieces of the law, and I appreciate Senator Abler bringing it forward, and I'm going to vote for it because I think the conversation needs to continue. I think there are reasonable restrictions in law right now, but I've talked to a number of folks who work in and live in sober homes for whom those restrictions aren't working. So I think that there is a broader conversation that can be had to ensure that folks get their medication, but also that we are protecting folks who are going through a sober journey for whom that this might be a difficulty. So I think, I'm not sure that it's ready quite as it is. I think a little bit more detail needs to go into it, but I think the conversation should continue. So I'm going to be voting yes, and I encourage people to vote, vote your conscience.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a member of the Senate Human Services Committee, I really appreciate Senator Abler bringing this amendment today. And on that committee, we get to hear many stories from Minnesotans and their path to recovery. And an important piece of that path to recovery can oftentimes include sober homes. And we hear about the importance of making sure that in the sober home context, that they're able to be in an environment that is free of controlled substances that may have been a part of their substance use disorder in the first place. And so I think this is a very common sense amendment, and I look forward to supporting it today.
Any other discussion before we go to the author of the amendment for his last comments before we vote? Senator Dibble.
Mr. President, I'm going to contradict myself and withdraw my request for a roll call. Thank you.
The roll call has been withdrawn. Any other discussion before we go to the author of the amendment? Seeing none, Senator Abler.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Again, being brief, I agree with Senator Port that this may need some massaging, but it's a really important topic. And how do we keep people on track from unintended harm? So I appreciate people's support, and thank you, Mr. President and members.
Members, all in favor of the A14 amendment, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The A14 amendment is adopted. Senator Grudenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to introduce the A15 amendment.
Senator Grudenhagen offers the A15 amendment. The Secretary will report the A15 amendment.
Senator Grudenhagen moves to amend Senate File number 2370 as follows. Page 26, after line 1, insert. This is the A15 amendment.
Senator Grudenhagen to your A15 amendment.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, basically, this is a pretty simple amendment. It just increases the distance from schools from 500 feet, like smoking marijuana or something like that, up to 1,000 feet. Members, you know, we don't want our children looking out the window and seeing people smoke marijuana, okay? And we all know that 500 feet will be infringed on, and that, so let's just keep it away from the children. You know, I've had experience in jail ministry where I've seen the consequences of addiction and the human exhaust that results on it in a number of areas, especially illegal drugs. And one of the questions that I'd encourage members to search out themselves is when you find a person who has an addiction, just ask them, when did you get addicted? And I'd say the overwhelming response is when they were a young person, because your mind's not fully developed. You tend to want to experiment with things. And once you get addicted, you cannot, you will do anything to feed that addiction. So members, let's push the use of the marijuana at least 1,000 feet. We know it's going to be infringed on, but let's keep it away from our schools and protect our children who are susceptible to addiction at such a young age and can be made to profit certain people in the sale of this type of product. So members, I hope the author would see it as a friendly amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Dibble to the A15 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, again, appreciate Senator Grudenhagen offering a reasoned amendment. I do have a different perspective and will request a no vote. Mr. President, as I understand, and I'll look to Senator Port to help us with a little bit of the history on this matter, but this was the subject of quite a bit of consultation, deliberation, stakeholder debate, and compromise, and the zoning and land use regulations were established through that consultative and that discussion process. And you know, members, I'll just say that when amendments are offered in the hope that they be considered friendly, it's more of the Senate tradition to have a conversation with the chief author about that amendment, and we can have that conversation before we get here onto the Senate floor when the chief author is seeing that for the very first time. Senator Abler, for example, did that on his bill. He started talking to me about it even a couple of weeks ago and in committee. So with that, Mr. President, I respect Senator Grudenhagen. I respect his perspective. I will push back a little bit. Use of cannabis as a young person is not the gateway that I think he believes it to be. If that were true, you know, every single person who is addicted to opioids probably ate peanut butter at some time. Is peanut butter a gateway drug to opioid addiction? It's not. You know, so that correlation does not equal causation, and that's been disproven time and time again. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other discussion? Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will just say these were all of these restrictions here were negotiated very carefully with many hours of conversations with relevant stakeholders. And I will say with schools, the reason we ended up at 500 feet was because most schools are in the middle of neighborhoods, particularly elementary schools, middle schools, and most of those schools have homes within 1,000 feet of them. This would prohibit those adults who own their homes from possessing or using a legal substance in their own home. And so for that reason, 500 feet was a marker that once mapped out across the state affected almost no homes and felt like the rational place to put it. And so for that reason, Mr. President, I ask for a no vote.
Members, just a reminder, there has been no roll call requested. Senator Dibble.
Thank you for the reminder, Mr. President. I would like to request a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Any other discussion before I go to the author of the amendment for the last words? Seeing none, Senator Grudenhagen.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it doesn't affect what people have inside their house. This amendment doesn't. It's just outside. So, members, if you've ever been around marijuana, and when I was out in California and a number of other places, you could smell a long ways away, okay? And that's not to say every young person that uses an addictive product gets addicted, but they are susceptible to it. Again, do some research in a prison, and you'll find that the addiction that many of these people suffer from, or even the homeless, started at a young age and progressively got worse, and it destroys their health and a number of other things. So let's protect our children. I ask for a green vote, and let's keep the use of it at least 1,000 feet away from our schools. Thank you, Mr. President.
Members, the Secretary will take the roll on the A15 Grudenhagen amendment. Members, please vote. Senator Hochschild, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Fate votes no.
Senator Fate votes no.
And Senator Rest votes no.
And Senator Rest votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Wiesenberg votes no.
Senator Wiesenberg votes no. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 27 ayes and 39 noes, the A15 Grudenhagen amendment is not adopted. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. And would Senator Dibble yield for a question?
Senator Dibble, will you yield? He will yield, Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Dibble, you know, I've been looking at this bill all the way back since it was first introduced. In fact, when this first idea of legalizing cannabis was brought about, I've been bringing this issue up, and it still hasn't been, in my opinion, fixed. But I'll bring it up. It's similar language on page 31 and page 41. And on 31, it's line 3113, where it talks about meeting zoning ordinances, which just about every area in the state have some type of site ordinance or zoning ordinance. But when it talks about complying with state building code and state fire code, the issue is in the majority of Minnesota, they don't have anyone to enforce that. So the question I have is when and especially on page 31, it talks about if applicable. Is it talking about being applicable to the building or to the operation, or is it if you have local building and fire codes, doesn't apply. Could you help me understand exactly what that if applicable means?
Senator Dibble, to this question.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I will look to my phone a friend over here to help me, but as I understand, and I think Senator Howe, if I'm not mistaken, you raised this question in committee as well, and if memory serves, the prevailing operative words there are if applicable, and if in fact a local unit of government doesn't abide by or doesn't recognize or use the state codes, then that's what would be operative. But I might be wrong, so Senator Port can help me explain a little further.
Senator Port, to the question.
Thank you, President Champion. Thank you, Senator Howe. It is my recollection, and it is a couple years now, but it is my recollection that this is the amendment we took, or the proposed language we took in conference committee to address this concern of yours, that if they did not have this, how would that person ever get that approval if they don't have someone to enforce that fire code? And so it's my recollection that this, if applicable, language was put in to address the concern that you had.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for that answer. But then if that's the case, if that's supposed to fix that, then take a look at page 41 on page 41.4, line 41.4, where it says you must comply. So how are those establishments that are outside of those places that have those folks that enforce those codes supposed to comply with that section in line 41.4?
Senator Port.
Mr. President, Senator Howe, I think that's a good question, and we should look at putting an amendment in there to add that, if applicable, again.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I would believe that I think the reason that we actually haven't fixed this is because it would cost us money, because I think it would cause a fiscal note, because I do believe the correct answer would be to require the state building code officials and the state fire code officials to go out and apply those codes like they do in many instances, such as places of assembly and that we do statewide, or schools or hospitals. And I think that's something that we should have looked like. And that's, Mr. President, I actually have proposed that numerous times, but we take no action on it. So I think what you're going to do, if you actually add that if applicable in there, you're going to have people going to these establishments or producing product in unsafe buildings. And I'll leave it though. Thank you, Mr. President, and I'll leave that sit where it may. Thank you.
Senator Port.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Howe. I apologize. I made an error when saying that. The difference between the two sections is that the first one is the information that you must put together for an application. So you must have sign off, if applicable. If there's no one to sign off, you can't do that. But your building still must meet the codes. And so the building that you build at the end has to meet those codes and will require a state building code, just like any other building that's built, must meet those codes. But if you don't have someone local to sign off on it, you can still put your application in, knowing that in the end, your building must meet those codes.
Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Senator Port, there are many, many, many buildings in the vast majority of Minnesota that are never built to a code because it's not enforced in most of Minnesota. If you're the only place where it must be adopted and enforced is in those locales that are over a population of 2,500. So no one inspects these buildings. No one looks at a new building. And in fact, what this is, when you look at page 31, when you say there's a difference, that's actually for the issuance of the license. So they've got these folks in that page there, that section of this, have got an application in, but their final authorization and issuance of license should hinge on actually having someone inspect that building. But in the most of Minnesota, all those towns and locales out there that are less than 2,500 people have no one to enforce that code, no one to go out and look at it. So I still believe that is a huge error in the bill, and that's why I'm a no. Thank you, Mr.
Seeing no other discussion, the Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File Number 2370, a bill for an act relating to cannabis, including the Office of Cannabis Management as an agency for the purpose of having a government-to-government relationship with tribal governments, etc.
Third reading. Any other discussion before we vote? Senator Dibble for the final words.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members, I just want to express my gratitude to everyone for a really, really great conversation, a good debate, civil debate. Thank you to the members for offering your amendments. Senator Nelson, I want to say specifically to you that I want to keep talking about some of the amendments that you've offered because I think there are some good ideas worthy of further debate and discussion and consideration. I want to especially thank the Office of Cannabis Management for all the work that they've done. Thanks, Senator Port, for bringing me up to speed. But a big thank you to Jackie Clinton and Amanda Peterson, who have been extremely, extremely helpful to me as we've moved through the process. I would thank Senator Klein, but I don't know if I should because I'm the one who ended up carrying all these bills because of his persistence in asking me to do so. So with that, appreciate everyone's time and thoughtfulness and look forward to getting on to the next stage in this deliberative process. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Secretary will take the roll on final passage as amended to Senate File Number 2370. Senator Hochschild, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Fate votes aye.
Senator Fate votes aye.
Senator Rest votes aye.
Senator Rest votes aye. Senator Jasinski?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Wiesenberg votes no.
Senator Wiesenberg votes no. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 34 ayes and 32 noes, the bill is passed and is titled agreed to. Members, we will now go to Senate File Number 2511, Senator Klein, for various liquor provisions modifications. Senator Klein.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members, for hearing Senate File 2511, the liquor omnibus bill for 2025. Members, it's a pretty straightforward bill. There are 10 local projects in here brought forward by members for various facilities within their cities that wish to issue a liquor license. There are 6 of them that are from DFL authors and 4 of them that are from Republican authors. None of them are controversial. Then we have two sort of policy changes to liquor policy in the state of Minnesota. One is regarding wine delivery, allowing the maximum number of cases of wine that can be delivered to an individual within the state from 2 cases to 4 cases. And then the other is the establishment of the privilege of social districts. If municipalities choose to pursue one, they have the right to establish one within their borders. That is the liquor omnibus bill for 2025. I ask for your green vote.
Any other discussion on Senate file number 2511? Senator Housley.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Klein. I know there's some good things in that bill. I just want to go on record that I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get the provision in there to get rid of 3-2 beer in the state of Minnesota. We are the last state in the country. I mean, Utah even got rid of 3-2 beer in 2019. But we still have 3-2 beer, and that's what our grocery stores and our convenience stores and even our resorts are only allowed to serve. There are multiple beer manufacturers across the country that don't even make 3-2 beer anymore. So I was hoping that provision would get into this year's liquor omnibus bill, but it didn't. So I'm hoping, Senator Klein, that maybe we can work on that next year. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, the Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate file number 2511, a bill for an act relating to liquor, authorizing various municipalities to issue liquor licenses.
Third reading. Any other discussion before we go for final passage? Seeing none, the Secretary will take the roll on final passage of Senate file number 2511. Senator Hoschow, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Fate votes aye.
Senator Fate votes aye.
Senator Rest votes nay.
Senator Rest votes no. Members, please vote.
Mr. President.
Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Senator Wiesenberg votes aye.
Senator Wiesenberg votes aye. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 53 ayes and 12 noes, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Members will now go to House File 1163. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. And members, you'll find on your desks a handout with regards to the Hometown Heroes Assistant Program and the assistance that this program has provided across the state in every county throughout Minnesota to all of our firefighters and fire departments. The bill here, all it does is it cleans up some language regarding the Hometown Heroes Assistance Program. And it basically, by providing two pieces, one clarifies that peer-to-peer support is part of their programming, and the other piece is to clarify that the training that they provide doesn't have to be provided annually, but it does need to be provided to the departments. And with that, Mr. President, I will stand for questions. That is the bill.
Any other discussion on House File number 1163? Seeing none, the Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
House File number 1163, a bill for an act relating to public safety, clarifying the scope of the Hometown Heroes Assistance Program.
Third reading. Any other discussion on House File number 1163 before we vote for final passage? Seeing none, the Secretary will take the roll for final passage of House File 1163. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Weissenberg votes aye.
Senator Weissenberg votes aye. Senator Hochschild, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Fate votes aye.
Senator Fate votes aye.
Senator Rest votes aye.
Senator Rest votes aye. Members, please vote. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 66 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Senator Murphy for a motion to recess.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move a recess until the call of the President. Members, we will come back later today just to adopt committee reports from the Committee on Finance. We'll just need a skeleton crew. Therefore, Mr. President, I move a recess to the call of the President.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Marty.
Mr. President, I just wanted to announce before you adjourn that Senate Finance will reconvene at 2:30.
Thank you. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Senator President. Mr. President, I'm wondering if I could make an announcement.
Senator Pappas, for your announcement.
Thank you. Members, this is regarding a resolution I introduced last week. From 1980 to 1924, there were 61 confirmed environmental disasters in Minnesota that cost the state at least $1 billion each. The cost of mitigation, reconstruction, repair, and prevention is currently being borne by taxpayers. These costs should be borne by and paid by the entities most culpable. 2 states, New York and Vermont, passed bills in 2024 to criminalize ecocide and hold perpetrators accountable for the cost of damages in their states. Many counties, countries, and the European Parliament have already legislated the crime of ecocide and its punishment. On December 4th, 2024, ecocide was proposed as a crime at the International Criminal Court with consequences equal to the human rights crimes of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Ecocide is legally defined as unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by these acts. My resolution also designates April as Ecocide Awareness and Prevention Month in Minnesota and encourages programs and public engagement to prevent environmental degradation, a threat multiplier of permanent harms to our state, our nation, and our planet. Thank you, Mr. President.
On the motion for recess, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. The Senate is now in recess until the call of the chair of the President.